Tonight, the executive director of a child welfare agency in Manitoba is fired amidst allegations of financial irregularities.
It was necessary. Enough is enough. You know, we lost a life, and in a drug-known shack where it's very well known for users and dealing and whatnot. And it really upset a lot of people.
A Mi'kmaq First Nation in New Brunswick uses Facebook Live to crack down on drug dealers in their community.
We're the target of racism, we're the target of microaggressions, we're the target of micromanagement. And then when we complain, we're labeled as a troublemaker.
And a new class action lawsuit alleges anti-Indigenous racism in the public service. Good evening. Welcome to APTN National News. I'm Melissa Ridgen. The executive director of a First Nation-run child welfare agency in Manitoba has been fired as an audit of the agency's expenses is ongoing. The Southern First Nations Network of Care, which oversees Sandy Bay Child and Family Services, said through a spokesperson today that the agency became concerned after noticing irregularities back in June. At that time, they took over administration of Sandy Bay CFS and began an operational and forensic review. Bay CFS. Auditors found Sandy Bay CFS had been running a deficit and, in light of the ongoing review, stopped paying credit card bills belonging to Delarond and his wife. Delarond was in the position for 15 years. A call to reach Delarond was not immediately returned. We will have more on this story on our website in the days to come at aptnnews.ca, so watch for that there. Well, we're still in Manitoba. The trial of a man accused of stabbing a 3-year-old boy to death last year is underway here in Winnipeg. Daniel Jensen has pleaded not guilty to first-degree murder in connection with the November 2019 death of Hunter Smith Straight. Court heard that Jensen was in a common-law relationship with Hunter's mother and was upset that she was going to move to Manitowoc, about 150 kilometers north of Winnipeg. Hunter was stabbed repeatedly in the head and neck while he was in his bed. These charges have not been proven in court as the trial continues. A Mi'kmaq First Nation in New Brunswick has decided to take some matters into their own hands and take the community back from drug dealers, and they used social media to do it. Community members surrounded and blocked off known drug houses until police arrived. Elsipogtog Chief and Council and community members went on Facebook Live as they blocked the road to a known drug house. A bag of drugs was found and a person fled. RCMP arrived and confirmed to APTN News that no arrests were made, but the investigation is ongoing. Community members formed a drug task force to patrol the community and offer support for addictions. Lorraine Clare says treatment will also be offered, but action needed to be taken now.
It was necessary. Enough is enough. You know, we lost a life, and in a drug-known shack where it's very well known for users and dealing and whatnot, and it really upset a lot of people.
We want to hear what you think about Elsipogtog taking matters into their own hands to address the community's drug problem. Here's how you can continue the conversation. Send your email to news@aptn.ca. You can leave a comment on aptnnews.ca. You can also find us on Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, YouTube, and TikTok. Follow APTN News and join the conversation and see our latest stories. A new class action lawsuit aims to force Ottawa to finally address anti-Indigenous racism in the public service. The claim was filed yesterday in federal court by 2 Blackfoot women from Alberta. The federal Indigenous departments are based in these buildings here in Gatineau, Quebec. Widespread systemic racism in these offices has allegedly created a climate of intimidation and fear. According to the statement of claim, Indigenous employees are denied advancement, marginalized, and ultimately forced to quit. Matthew Farrell of Calgary-based Guardian Law Group is representing the alleged victims. Plaintiff Letitia Wells is a former employee at Indian Oil and Gas. She says these issues have festered for far too long.
We're the target of racism. We're the target of microaggressions. We're the target of micromanagement. And then when we complain, we're labeled as a troublemaker. And so we don't want to have to tell our stories over and over again to prove that we've been harmed. We would like support.
Halifax today and was asked about that class action lawsuit that we just told you about. What more can be done to address systemic racism within government? He had this to say.
We were the first government to recognize systemic discrimination in all our institutions across this country, including the federal government, which is one of the reasons why on appointments, on investments, on support for racialized, minority and Indigenous employees, we've increased supports. We've created opportunities. We've created pathways into it. We've created more resources. We've brought in mechanisms for better reporting of discrimination or examples of unfair practices. But yes.
To the Yukon now. The number of Chinook salmon has been dropping for decades. Now those numbers are even lower. As Sarah Connors tells us, Yukon First Nations are concerned and they want their next MP to do something about it.
Camps in lots of different places and stuff. And that's the thing with First Nation people is that
Sean Smith is a Kwanlindon First Nation citizen. He can still remember the stories his grandmother would tell him about Chinook salmon.
Things where we didn't. My grandma would tell me stories of her actually going salmon fishing and then cutting and drying the salmon for weeks.
But for Smith, it's a different story.
I'd say it's within 15 to 20 years we haven't fished. We haven't put a net in down through here.
That's because these fish have been declining for decades. Last summer, around 33,000 Chinook made it to their spawning grounds in the Yukon, well below the historical average of around 55,000 fish. This year's numbers are even lower at 31,000 Chinook. Like many others, Smith no longer harvests Chinook, so they have a chance to repopulate.
It's something that that definitely has affected the cultural connection to the river, and that's a piece that should really be understood by the younger generation that are coming up.
Out of precaution, many Yukon First Nations voluntarily closed Chinook harvesting to their citizens. The issue is so pressing it was raised at an all-candidates forum last week hosted by the Council of Yukon First Nations.
Yukon First Nations have been restricting Aboriginal rights to harvest Yukon River salmon for well over 20 years. How do you plan to address this major issue for Yukon First Nations on a national front?
All 5 candidates say they're committed to the issue.
I've got a little boy, and I really do worry that he's never going to have an opportunity to fish for salmon.
James McDonald is a Ta'an Quachin Council citizen and the chair of the Yukon Salmon Subcommittee. He says there's a combination of factors for the Chinook's decline, including climate change.
Salmon are a cold water fish, so they like cold water, and the warming temperature we think has had a detrimental impact on their mortality in river.
With the federal election right around the corner, he wants to see a vested interest in Yukon River salmon.
Anytime, salmon is in the news or there's a public awareness initiative around salmon, that's the positive signal that people care about these species, that they want to maintain and protect these stocks now and into the future.
We did fish down along Labarge.
Meanwhile, Smith says he's trying to stay positive about the salmon.
If we want to have hope and do what we can to really put our efforts to help the salmon recover, those are things that we need to do in a bigger picture.
Sarah Connors, APTN National News, Whitehorse.
It's time for us to take a break, but here's a look at something that we're working on for you.
Thanks to this water treatment facility behind me, the people from Shoal Lake 40 First Nation can turn on their taps and take a sip. They've just lifted their 24-year boil water advisory, a huge win for the community after struggling with water and land access for over 100 years. I'll have more on that story tomorrow about the treatment plant that cost $29 million to build, along with Shoal Lake 40's journey to get here tomorrow at 5. Michelle Karlenzig, APTN National News, Shoal Lake 40.
One person is dead after a helicopter accident near one of Nunavut's newest mines. The accident happened around 13 kilometers from the mine sites. After landing, a helicopter rolled over, killing a contractor who's on the ground. The deceased has not been identified pending notification of next of kin. The National Transportation Safety Board, the RCMP, and Nunavut's coroner are all investigating the death. Hope Bay Mine was purchased by Canadian mining company Agnico Eagle in February 2021 after the Canadian government stepped in to prevent the selling of the mine to China. While all eyes are on the federal election, history is being made in Calgary's upcoming municipal election. The city has its first Blackfoot candidate running for a councillor. APTN's Tamara Pimentel has that story.
As Marilyn Northpagan and her team make their way door to door in Calgary's Ward 7, support for her campaign grows. The Piikani Nation member is the first Blackfoot person to run for councillor in the city surrounded by Blackfoot communities.
We need leadership that reflects our community. How else are we going to bring these solutions to a greater level?
But Northpagan says she represents more than the Indigenous community. As a longtime resident, a Canadian Forces veteran, and committee member that produced the White Goose Flying Report. That's the local response to the Truth and Reconciliation Commission.
We need to get that White Goose Flying Report implemented into City Hall, which is supposed to be the betterment of everybody. We still have a ways to go, and we still have so much to tackle. And I know right now the City of Calgary is ready for Truth and Reconciliation. It's about understanding how to implement it. That's we're lacking right now. So with that, you know, we need to start with the education piece with the non-Indigenous community right now.
Whether it's for a municipal or federal election, Northpagan says voters have to recognize the barriers Indigenous candidates face when making the decision to run.
When we step up, we go through more than what our non-Indigenous counterparts go through. We have to deal with the racism. We have to deal with the lateral violence in our community. So these are things and avenues that we have to really think about if we're going to take this jump. And those are hard decisions to make, especially if you're at home and you're dealing with your own issues from back home. We're still dealing with our own intergenerational trauma. They really want to divulge into my background, and they want to know whether I'm just here as an activist or if I'm here as a true leader. So I've had to define that for people, especially non-Indigenous, when I've been door knocking and saying, you know what, I'm not an activist, I'm actually here for the whole community.
Calgarians are scheduled to vote for a city council on October 18th. Northpagan says she hopes it's an opportunity to bring Indigenous and non-Indigenous in Calgary together.
We need to work together. And with that, our Indigenous people and our leaders especially, they bring that experience and that wisdom, those two worlds together. And that's what I'm very happy that I have right now, are those two worlds.
Tamara Pimentel, APTN National News, Calgary.
COVID-19 cases are on the rise in many parts of the country as the fourth wave of the Delta variant rages on. Indigenous communities are also being impacted. With a look at the current situation, here's Daryl Stranger.
The fourth wave of the COVID-19 pandemic is seen by many as one among the unvaccinated, with cases within mostly that demographic rising once again across the country. According to the latest numbers from Indigenous Services Canada, there are 1,682 active cases of COVID-19 in First Nation communities. Since the beginning of September, the reported active COVID cases among First Nations people has risen to 3.5 times higher than Canada's general population. In Manitoba, as of September the 13th, there are 213 active cases of COVID-19 among First Nations people. 18 of those are people in the ICU. With the fourth wave also comes the return of school. Dr. Marcia Anderson of the Manitoba Pandemic Response Coordination Team says vaccines are the key to beating the virus and keeping schools open.
The single most important thing for keeping schools open and kids safe in schools is the amount of community transmission of COVID-19. So the most important thing to keeping schools safe is keeping our case numbers in communities and across the province low. And the most important way that we can do that, of course, is by having as many people who are eligible for the vaccine vaccinated.
Elsewhere, there are 181 active cases in the Northwest Territories. Also in the NWT, Kakiza has a 100% vaccination rate in residents 12 years of age and older. In the Yukon, there are 23 active COVID cases and just one active case in Nunavut. In total, Alberta has been the hardest hit province with over 10,000 cases. Saskatchewan and Manitoba are approaching that number as well, with over 9,000 total cases each. BC and Ontario have seen over 3,000 cases each. Quebec is approaching 1,000, and the Atlantic region has seen 39 cases of COVID-19. 755,639 vaccine doses have been given to First Nations members, 332,768 of which were second doses in individuals aged 12 and up. Daryl Stranger, APTN National News, Winnipeg.
Ontario is sharing more details on its vaccine certificate system, which comes into effect next Wednesday. Proof of vaccination will be required in places like restaurants, bars, gyms, and sporting events.
I think they should have passports to identify who's vaccinated and who's not.
I feel like some people may be uncomfortable with having to prove that they have to show a piece of identification to go into a restaurant.
At first, you'll need a paper or a digital receipt showing your vaccination status. A digital passport or a QR system will be set up by late October.
This is not going to take us out of a fourth wave. This is not going to be the one policy that saves the day. This just helps create safer indoor spaces. That's what it does. That's what it does. It helps create safer indoor spaces. It helps keep businesses open. It helps keep people comfortable and safer inside.
Some businesses say that they worry they could be on the hook for facing fines if people don't comply. Well, it's time for another break, but still ahead, 2 Indigenous stars get hitched while another one turns heads at the Met Gala. Stay with us. Welcome back. It's time now for our photo of the day. During an early evening boat ride, Jess Moore sent us this picture of the river back near St. George, northeast of Winnipeg, Manitoba. Keep those photos coming. You can email them to share@aptn.ca, and you might be our next photo of the day. Let's take a look now at tomorrow's weather forecast. Off to the east coast, we've got 22 and some cloud for Fredericton, 19 and showers expected for Halifax. Nain, sunny and 12 degrees. Cartwright, 15 and sunshine. 19 in Gaspé with sunny skies, 20 in Quebec City. Ottawa, 22 in sunshine, same with North Bay, 23 and sunny in Sault Ste. Marie. Kapuskasing, 22 in showers. Timmins, sunshine and 22. Norway House, 16 with a chance of rain, 13 in showers in Churchill. 17 in showers in Winnipeg. Dauphin, 18 and sunny. 15 for Swift Current, cloudy skies there. Clouds for the rest of the southern portion of the province. 10 in La Ronge and cloud, 9 in rain in Stony Rapids. 13 in showers for High Level, 7 in showers for Fort McMurray. 13 and sunny in Calgary, 16 in sunshine for Medicine Hat and Lethbridge. 15 and sunny in Campbell River, 18 and sunny in Kamloops. Sunshine and 15 for Fort Nelson, mix of sun and cloud in Smithers and 14 degrees. 11 for Dawson City and Beaver Creek, mostly sunny. 12 in sunshine for Wrigley and Norman Wells and Fort Leard and Trout Lake, both 15 and sunny. Inuvik, 13, mix of sun and cloud. Paulatuck and Colville Lake, both 8 and sunny. 7 in showers for Whale Cove and Chesterfield, 4 in New Yacht. Pangertung, 2. Joe Haven, -2. Southern Ontario, the province's Lieutenant Governor and Canada's first Indigenous Appeals Court judge were among trailblazing volunteers, community members and allies honored at Mississaugas of Credit First Nation over the weekend. APTN's Elena McDougall has that story.
I've always tried to do everything that I could to help anybody or everybody.
Members and friends of Mississaugas of Credit First Nation, or MCFN, were recognized with Eagle Awards at an outdoor ceremony just outside Brantford recently. Ontario's Lieutenant General Elizabeth Dowdeswell was among honoured guests and award recipients.
We always want to thank those who do so much for us, whether they're members or whether they're allies or whether they're friends. And we haven't been doing that enough, so we came up with the awards.
Carol Tobacco received the 2021 Volunteer Award for decades spent devoted to events and preservation of history and culture.
Well, I never really expected to get something like this, but it's nice to know that people do appreciate what you have done, and something that I can look back on, and I'm glad that I have done all those things in the community.
Other recipients included the late educator Carl King, rights advocate Joanne Webb, historian Jane Beecroft, and the first Indigenous person to sit on the Ontario Court of Appeal, Justice Harry Laforme, who was born and raised at Mississaugas of Credit.
So the fact that this honor comes from my own community, as it does, is about as special, I think, as anybody can get, and certainly special for me. It's humbling. It will be a source of pride forever.
The community is hopeful next year's awards will be unrestricted so all members and friends can attend.
But the awards help us to remember who we are and where we belong, and we belong everywhere.
Elena McDougall, APTN National News, Mississaugas of Credit First Nation.
Well, the annual Met Gala in New York is a star-studded haute couture spectacle that fashionistas fuss over each year, but this year, an Indigenous model and actor stole the show. Kwana Chasing Horse is seen here in what appears to be a photobomb by Kris Jenner of Keeping Up with the Kardashian fame. The Indigenous activist and model from Alaska turned heads and dropped jaws in a dress by Peter Dundas and jewelry by Navajo designer Jocelyn Billy Upshaw. This year's Met Gala theme was American Independence. Chasing Horse is Han-Gwich'in and Oglala Lakota. She shared these Getty Images snaps on her Twitter after the event. Well, and some happy news for those romantics out there, or maybe sad news if you wanted these two to stay on the market. Wedding bells have rung for Ashley Coullingbull and her hockey star, Beau. The Cree model, actor, and activist took to her Instagram with photos of her and Wacy Rabbit, who is from Kenai territory near Lethbridge, part of the Blackfoot Confederacy, of course. Rabbit is a star in his own right, having won the Memorial Cup with the WHL's Saskatoon Blades before going on to play pro hockey in 6 countries around the globe. The couple said, "I do" last weekend. Coullingbull is from Inuk Cree Nation and was the first Indigenous Mrs. Universe. Congratulations to both of them. Well, that is your midweek news. We thank you so much for joining us. Always pleased that you tune in. I'm Melissa Ridgen. Dennis Ward is back in the host chair tomorrow. Until then, have a great night.